Welcome back to the Blog Boy Roundtable. Again, not the full complement of Blog Boys this week, but we do have Anthony Vito, Nathan Bond, and myself from the Bay Area Examiner, and Nick Saban from DraftKings Network. Our absences are brought to you by the letter C. Colin has COVID, and Steve is at the Bucks Creamsicle event. So that's where they are. We have, I think we have a fun show tonight. We're going to talk some AP poll. Just came out earlier today, top 25. Georgia's number 1, Michigan 2, Ohio State 3, Alabama 4, and LSU 5. That's your top 5. Interesting top 10, especially when you think of as in terms of the beginning of last season, just kind of where teams have moved around a little bit. And then we'll talk a little bit of Pac 4, Pac 2. We'll talk what are they going to do. Pack. Yeah, we might get a little bit of the pack. And then we have a fun little game to end. We're basically going to pick who we want to see lose this year. What would be funny? What would be best for college football? We've each got 8 losses to distribute around, and we'll decide who we want to see lose. So that'll be fun. Let's start with the AP top 25. Like I mentioned, the top 5, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, Alabama. Georgia had 60 of the 63 first place votes. It looks like Michigan had 2, Ohio State had 1, LSU's 5, followed by USC, Penn State, Florida State, Clemson, and Washington. Anybody surprise you in the top 10? Is Washington a surprise, or is it because they returned so many guys? You feel pretty good about at least that offense, right?
Was a pleasant surprise to see Washington that high. Because like we were saying, how it's a shame that the Pac-12 stuff is like how the Pac-12 is imploding this year, because it's going to be an interesting season across the conference. And one of those interesting things is Michael Penix returning at quarterback and him potentially putting together a Heisman run up there. So them getting the respect of being a top 10 team. And also they won 11 games last year. It's like kind of the quietest 11-win season in recent memory. Like they went to the Alamo. I forgot who they beat in the Alamo Bowl, but yeah, good to see Washington in that mix. Other than that, like it's pretty straightforward. It's the usual suspects kind of at the top of the AP poll. Obviously Georgia, the 2-time defending national champion, being the top dog heading into the season. And I think McMurphy brought it up, how it's kind of a, like the being the preseason number 1 is kind of a curse. Like how in the last 2 decades, the only teams that have started preseason number 1 and actually won the national championship is 2004 USC and 2017 Alabama. Everyone else has at least stumbled a couple of times or fallen short. So that'll be interesting to see how the Dogs handle that going into the season and throughout the season.
Yeah, and not just Washington. You kind of look throughout here. You got 6 USC, 10 Washington, 14 Utah, 15 Oregon, 18 Oregon State. I mean, you got a lot of Pac-12 teams on here still, and then I think UCLA is like 27 or 28. Yeah, they're receiving votes. So I mean, you got that's the I think that's something the common refrain is like the biggest shame of the Pac-12 stuff is that they're going to have a really interesting season. So that's it's going to be marred a little bit by all the by the death of that conference, but maybe we'll talk about that in a second. Vito, anything stick out to you on here? I thought Utah.
Like kind of going through it, I do like some of these top 10 teams. I'm actually a little surprised Florida State is at 8. I kind of expected, especially since you have LSU, FSU off the bat, the ability to put them both like top 5 or 5-6 or something like that. But to have them behind Penn State and USC, I was a little surprised by that. And I'm also a little surprised that Clemson is right behind them. I know they expect to have Cole Kubelic or Kubelic. How do you say his last name?
Kublik
to take a giant step forward, and they expect to have the talent and the receivers in the backfield again to kind of compete. But having them as high as they are, that's kind of proof of concept that Dabo kind of built something there where everyone's going to give him the benefit of the doubt. But The first thing I saw that I expected Florida State to be at least neck and neck with LSU, but 8 is a little low to me. From considering they literally bring everybody back. They have Jordan Travis, who's could be a Heisman contender. The defense got better, and you have a possible top 5 pick and Jared Verse. Like that seemed like a team that's ready to go game one. And hey, we'll find out game one. That's got to be a heck of a game that opening weekend. But that was probably a big one. Tulane being the only group of 5 team as well, number 24. And I'm starting to think that as these conferences start solidifying, you're going to see less and less of that. But kudos to Tulane for cracking that top 25. That's always a good thing to start the year at. And
UTSA is right outside there. I think they're 29 in terms of votes. So they're the American is obviously it's the Power 6 or maybe the Power 5. Nathan, anything stick out to you here? Anybody overrated, underrated in your eyes?
I mean, kind of echoing Vito, I really kind of thought Florida. I didn't think top 5, but definitely a little bit closer. I mean, we're nitpicking here, but there's close to 100 points difference between 6th place USC and 8th place Florida State. I just really like what Florida State has coming back. Like they're basically replacing Trayshawn Ward with like a better running back, and he was a very talented running back in his own right. Plus, you're returning Jordan Travis, who I absolutely loved last season, and you guys all watched Blog Boy Roundtable clearly last year. I was very high on Florida State going into the year because they had a really good quarterback. And give me a quarterback. Like I don't trust Penn State. I think that's going to be. I just don't trust it. LSU. I don't know. Jaden Daniels is still the quarterback, right? Like I haven't lost my mind. Like this is still the guy who, like, if there's a modicum of pressure, he kind of crumbles. So
he was very good last year, though.
I worry about him sustaining, and then this is Clemson in the top 10. It's the Clemson bump. They're on the downward slope. I think they're still probably a 10-11 win team going forward, but they need to jump to the SEC quicker than probably most. Like I think Florida State's sustainable. Clemson needs to get to the SEC before the glass house shatters, because I think we're teetering on it. If they don't find a quarterback, I'm not entirely sure Cole's the guy, and they're not really producing the wide receivers like they had been over the last few years, and that's been kind of their calling card. I know former USF head coach Jeff Scott was a big part of that. They've got to figure out the skill positions, because they're not the offense only works when skill positions can kind of create separation, and we haven't seen that over the last couple of years. It could have been DJ's fault, but he's now at Oregon State, so we're really going to find out if it was the quarterback or the talent around him.
Point of order: we're getting Cole Kubelik, ESPN announcer, confused with Cade Klubnik.
Oh no!
Cade Klubnik is the Clemson quarterback.
That's not the first time. That's not the first time I've done that too.
So just so people know, we got it. We're here.
Cole Klubnik, right?
I think
Cade Klubnik.
Yeah, Cole Kubelik, Cade Klubnik.
Oh my gosh!
That's what I was like. Okay, I was like, is Vito got some O-line? Vito's got like an O-line take coming up here, because I thought he was asking about Cole Kubelik. I was like, okay. And then,
jeez Louise. I was just, I that's how much I don't trust him.
He's got to earn it.
I'll learn your name.
Got to earn his real name.
I'll learn your name when you matter.
It took me a little too long to figure out DJ Uiagalelei, and then he left. So I'm like, all right, I'm done with Clemson quarterback.
I'm done.
You're waiting for you're going to wait a little bit longer.
I need like a Tommy Smith, like ASAP.
Is Florida State's defense any good?
I think we'll find out.
Trick question?
No, that's a real question. Florida, not a great Florida team, went up and down the field on them last year. And Oklahoma, a great Oklahoma team did the same. It could push them in the bowl. That's what I'm worried about with them. I saw a note today. Jaheim Bell, who's like a stud transfer from South Carolina. I think their offense is going to be awesome. He told the defensive coordinator that they needed to work on tackling after nobody on the team could tackle them in a scrimmage. And the defensive coordinator said, "Thank you for the note." We saw him live. He's not the most charismatic dude, right? Nate, we saw him last year at the coaches clinic. Norvell couldn't make it. He sent the DC. It was he gave us a presentation on people running, so that was helpful. All right, so Yeah, I think Florida State, though, if you do feel they're kind of underseeded, they play LSU and Clemson, the first 4 weeks of the season?
Yeah, we'll know what they
You'll
are.
know early. They'll be. You'll know. Yeah, by the end of September, they might be at the top if they win.
We have the week 1 weird crap, but then after that, you'll know what they are.
If they're 4-0 after Clemson, they'll probably be ranked 1 or 2. So they've got it all in front of them there.
And I honestly kind of thought it was just more of a you could set up that matchup and then kind of reset. Reset afterwards. I think that's probably about right. Just USC and Penn State have a lot more question marks, I think, than Florida State right now. So you could have set up Florida State LSU right there, and then whoever wins that game, you kind of reset. And if it's a banger like it was last year, then I don't think anybody expected that game when it happened with that ending, expected both of them to end strong. I think everyone was like, oh, this is 2 6-6 teams.
Yeah,
it's a mid-off or whatever.
Fight.
I think that was yeah.
And it's LSU. LSU was successful last year in spite of the continued special teams problems. So, like, if they can kind of right the ship there, I mean,
that coach has been moved into the personnel department. So I think they might have noticed some issues there. So
yeah.
All right, at top 25, not too many surprises really at all. And does this really matter before October?
And I think the last thing, outside of the top 10, the important stuff is, TCU does fall 15 spots from where they basically ended last season. They're at 17th. And this is going, I don't want to say it's going to be kind of judgment on Sonny Dykes and what he can do, but they lost a whole bunch of talent. They lost a bunch of talent to the NFL. They lost their quarterback, the top wide receiver. A lot of the defense is gone. His whole philosophy was go into the portal, get some dudes, and figure it out. And was last year him coaching up, Gary Patterson's old guys, or was that him pulling the right strings? It's kind of, for the Tampa folks, it's the John Gruden, Tony Dungy scenario where we go into year 2. Like, okay, who was it really? That's going to be very interesting going into this season. I love the Horned Frogs. I think they're a fun team, but there's going to be some eyes on what happens in Fort Worth this year for sure.
And before we move on, one thing I also noticed is the media actually showing some restraint with Texas, putting them at 11. So, yeah, like Texas, the way this is setting up, Texas should, and is rightfully the favorite in the Big 12 heading into this year. But this is normally where you would hear Texas is top 5, Texas is back, national champion. And it's like, no, they're gonna, and it's like, no, they're gonna be good. It's just like, let's pump the brakes and like wait until the Alabama game to like really like pass judgment on them. So credit to the media for like kind of rightfully placing them in the preseason rankings.
Fellas, I have a quick take on that.
Let's hear
I have a quick take on that one. If Texas doesn't win the Big 12 this year, I'm going to put my stamp on it. They're never going to win the Big 12.
I think that's a good call there,
Bold take.
Yeah. They will never win another conference championship. How about that? That's the bold take. If they don't win it this year, they're never winning another conference title.
So Nathan Bond says no SEC championships for Texas. Interesting.
More programs that Tulane can say they have more SEC championships then. That's all I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. Speaking of Texas, they moved to the SEC realignment. Their old conference seems to be doing all right, the Big 12, because they've basically killed the Pac-12, or what's now is the Pac-4. What do we think is going to happen there? So there's there's been a couple stories out. I think Sports Illustrated did one about kind of the Athletic did one about, the total bungling of the media deal on the Pac-12 side. They thought they'd get $50 million a team after USC and UCLA said we were leaving. So not the best negotiating. But you've got 4 left. You got Stanford, Cal, Washington State, Oregon State. It seemed early like there's going to be a Mountain West merger possibly. Now there was the flirtation with the ACC, and Florida State, Clemson, North Carolina State said no dice. Apparently, that's all they needed to squash that. And now there's some flirtation with the American in the Pac-4. Trying to keep that auto bid, trying to stay a Power 5, and just basically merging with the American. What do you guys think is going to happen here? It seemed like the Mountain West stuff was the easiest layup, but there's some stuff with the Pac-12 and some lawsuits and other things out there where they owe some money. So you'd like to, I think, keep the Pac-12 name somehow, or keep some of that somehow just for the autonomy. But Nathan, what are you thinking? Where do you think this is heading?
Yeah, so what they each school owes Comcast what, $50 million, or just the entire conference?
I think that one's the entire conference. I think there's also a lawsuit from the Holiday Bowl. I believe for a couple of years ago when UCLA pulled out the day of the game. I think there's a lawsuit there as well. There's a few different money things out there that make it a little it says some people are kind of second guessing, but.
So Mike Oresco, the AAC commissioner, he's a dreamer. Would probably be putting it kindly with the P6 mantra, but he's not an idiot. And getting into bed with these four and trying to maintain or convert some semblance of the PAC name without these lawsuits being settled, I don't see that happening anytime soon. And frankly, I feel terrible for Stanford. Of all the schools, they just got absolutely screwed with everything that went on. There's really no other peer. I guess the AAC, if Stanford joined, they'd have 4 or 5 AAU schools, and Stanford really cares about academics, and that'd be great. But man, those 4 teams just they're going to be drifting into the night until they figured out this lawsuits, because no other conference. I think that's probably why, outside of logistics, why the ACC was so quick to shut that down. Figure out your house and we'll see if we want to come rescue you or to that effect. Honestly, I just let it all happen, and then I don't really have a strong opinion one way or the other after what's happened over the last couple of weeks. I don't feel like flying to Pullman. That's my big takeaway. Is I do not want to fly from Tampa International to Pullman, Washington. That does not sound fun at all. Now you can get me to go to Berkeley, Stanford, Palo Alto for sure.
I'll go to Pullman.
I'm not going to Pullman.
I'll make the ride.
Such a far flight. Hard pass.
For a football game, it'd be fun.
And it's literally in the middle of nowhere, correct?
It's
it's
a flight,
not even
a bunch of bus rides, I think.
Right?
Yeah, that sounds like a good time there.
Where Pullman is in the state of Washington, it's literally right down the street from
Idaho,
yeah.
Right? Yeah, absolutely not. It's disgusting. I don't want to go to Idaho. Are you kidding me? The Uber from if flying into Baltimore to go to the Navy game and stay in DC, even that's a little guys, let's relax. What are we doing here? That's how much I don't like to travel after a flight. So give me a break. Do I have to fly into Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, and then drive to Pullman? Is that probably the quickest way? Do I have to? If I have to end up in Idaho anywhere to get to Pullman, Washington, I'm out.
Nathan, not a fan of the Palouse.
It won't.
No.
So the Cougs.
Vito, what are you thinking? Are you thinking this merger seems like? I mean, that if you read unhinged realignment Twitter and the people that don't use their real name, except for a guy that's a media expert that I don't know if he's really a media expert. This seems like a real possibility that the 4, and this is the only way that the 4 Pac-4 schools stay together, would be a merger with the American. What do you think? Do you think that's likely? And also, is that something you would enjoy?
Well, let's go with our buddy OS_Beaver, who's got all the takes, the flaming hot takes of a 20-team league that poaches somehow Virginia Tech and NC State.
So I saw that when the ACC dodged. They're going to pull.
Oh my goodness, I don't know how that happens. So the only reason I think, like, I didn't believe this at all. It's like there's no way this is going to happen. But there's no TV deal for the Pac-4. And there wasn't any incentive for a TV deal to occur with the rest of the Pac-8. So what's going on now? If there's no TV deal, the only TV deal that makes the most sense is the American, who has the biggest. So if ESPN is pulling the strings, they might say, let's go ahead and do this. Let's suggest we go ahead and do this merger. We'll figure out the logistics later and do some sort of only one West Coast trip or only one East Coast trip, and schedule that football. And I don't know if you mentioned it, but Oliver Luck's now getting involved, seeing what he wants to do. But I don't see how you can keep the Pac name. They don't have a TV deal, and as of right now, you can't just say, "Oh, we'll go ahead and put everything together and then we'll make a TV deal," because the American teams, or the Mountain West teams, have buyouts that they don't want to pay if they don't know what the TV deal is, and no one's going to make a TV deal until you get the teams already committed. Then you're going to get what San Diego State happened. So this seems to have legs and seems to make sense. And I don't really know what the Pac-4 are going to do. And if this is what ESPN pushes you to do, we've seen this round of realignment be pushed by the TV markets, or sorry, by the networks, which is unfortunate. But that's what seems to make the most sense from a money standpoint, even though it's not going to be great money.
Yeah, with those kind of entities being the ones pushing stuff, though, I think that's where it makes the most sense, according to, like I said, the unhinged element of realignment Twitter. If you have some type of merger, you would have 4 different time zones to have games, those 4 different windows for games, which is important. The rumor is Apple would still be involved. They still want a piece because they want more live sports. So they'd still like a piece of it. So there was a rumor of a combination between ESPN and Apple that could get you. And they may even, I saw one that was like tiered. So, the Stanfords and the bigger schools, and USF was included in this person's tiering, would get like 15 million. And then others would get 12. And then the lower tiers would get 10 a year. And it would kind of be tiered. The payouts would be tiered. I don't know. The one thing that I don't understand, and Nick, I'll have you jump in here in a second. The Mountain West, the getting out of the exit fees for the Mountain West seem pretty concrete and substantial. So I see a lot of people putting San Diego State and Boise State in this new conference. It doesn't seem like that would be likely, especially not next year. That would seem to be if you're going to do that, it's a 2025 thing, right? Like, is that should we automatically disqualify people that put those two in, or do you think that's even possible a couple years down the road?
No, that's valid, because it's $34 million. It's $34 million to break out, and maybe a couple of schools in the Mountain West would have the cash to do that, but not a lot of those schools would.
Is it 17 with a 2-year notice?
2-year notice,
and 34 with the 1-year notice, right?
So, but that's like, it's July 1st, so you're already like your 2-year window. Like you're not getting out until 2025, 2026. Yeah. With the 1 year, 2025. Like you're already past unless you want to pay more.
Yeah.
Unless you can always pay more to get out. Yeah. Money solves a lot of issues, but do you really want to pay $40+ million to get out of the Mountain West?
To make $10 million?
That's insane.
All right, Nick, go ahead.
Oh yeah. Obviously, as like a USF alum, I am intrigued by this like weird Frankenstein Pac AAC merger. Whatever you're gonna have, so you're gonna have theoretically Oregon State and ECU in the same league. They'll probably not like play each other, or it'll be designed where they don't play each other that often. But you know what, screw it. Like we're already off the rails in terms of realignment and like these conferences being like mashed and jammed together. So it would just be funny and like interesting to see like Wazoo come to Tampa.
Yeah. Get them early.
The one thing I find like really fascinating is how Stanford is kind of like the head of the table here. Stanford's kind of the point man, the point school in these situations. Like, obviously with certain conference like Texas was the head of the table at the Big 12. They were like the big power. When you think about the SEC, like Alabama's kind of that school. The ACC, I guess, like the power kind of still runs through the 4 North Carolina Tobacco Road schools. And so it's kind of interesting how you break down the Pac-12 and, these 4 schools are kind of like in limbo, and then everyone turns to Stanford as like the people who are like kind of deciding where all of this is going to go. So that's what I've been finding fascinating about this, even with like these random Twitter users and Twitter posters putting together these different conference alignments and everything like that. I think ultimately at the end of the day, Stanford and Cal, they're kind of still holding out hope that the Big Ten will throw them a lifeline, even if it's at like a severely reduced rate. I think that's like their pie in the sky dream. Like, okay, let's at least reunite with like the 4 other schools in the Pac-12 that are already going to the Big Ten, so we can at least kind of like maintain some semblance of like regional rivalries and what we had in this new league. So I think that's where they're kind of like crossing their fingers and hoping it happens.
Yeah, and there seems to be they have other options if they want them, but they do not include Oregon State and Washington State. So it seems like there's one way forward if they all 4 want to stay together. A couple things. I'm kind of the Stanford being treated like king is really confusing me because we just got told they're not valuable for TV, or they would have been taken by the Big Ten, or the Big 12 would have reached out to them first. I think maybe there's probably some cultural things at Stanford that maybe limited that, but it's funny to kind of see them be treated like it's Ohio State on the open market here. It's like it's all right. It's Stanford. They've had some recent history, but it's not like they're got an unbelievable. Now there are other sports, yes, but football, which seems to be driving everything, not quite as much. And then the other thing that's odd, if you don't get Boise State, you don't get San Diego State. Okay, so now Oregon State's going to have to travel down to Texas 3 times because that's going to be their division. They're going to be those Texas teams. So there seems to be something else still missing. But it would be very funny if they merged and they got to keep the the P5 moniker and the autonomy, and now USF's just in a P5 conference just like that after winning 3 games in 4 games in 3 years. So that would be interesting. So, all right, let's get to our game here. Now, we've talked about a lot of teams here, but now we get to kind of set the direction here of the state of college football, or maybe what you think would be funny. We get to hand out 8 losses apiece. So we knew this in advance. Everybody kind of went through schedules, saw what games, who they wanted to lose. If you want, you can be general. Like Stieg, he's not here, but he just basically said 8 people on USF schedule lose to USF. Okay, perfect. That could be pretty cool, right? So USF automatically would have 8 wins. That'd be a great year if you're a USF fan.
He's a homer.
He is a homer. I'd imagine, and I'm going to ask you guys at the end here if you could give USF 2 wins this year. So think about it at the very end. If you gave USF 2 wins, what 2 games would you pick? But we'll start with the losses. We're handing out losses. Nick, you said you had a strategy. I thought it was interesting. You didn't tell us too much, but it was an interesting pitch. So we'll have you go first here. How are you distributing your losses? You can go through all 8. You can go through a few at a time. Who are you distributing losses to?
Yeah, so when I was thinking about this, I was kind of, because obviously the AP poll just came out today, and just kind of going through the top 10 and thinking about the college football playoff at the end of the season, I kind of, and how it's always kind of, just chalky with like the same teams involved, like, who's going to go to the play, like, who's going to basically be competing for the playoffs. I kind of wanted to make things very interesting in the month of November. I wanted to create not mass chaos, just kind of, basically just chaos, down the stretch with each of these teams being knocked off. So right off the bat, just first of all, just to make things interesting, I'm giving 2 of my losses to Georgia. So I'm going to have Georgia lose their early season game to South Carolina. They slip up at home. Spencer Rattler runs around the field, gets a couple of touchdowns, and knocks off the Dogs. Then they fire up the machine. They fire the machine back up. They mow through all of these opponents down the stretch. And then November 18th, they lose to Tennessee. They just get completely clipped by Joe Milton. Joe Milton throws for 1,700 yards. They get clipped. And, you have a two-loss Georgia basically at the end of the season. Kind of staying in the SEC, you have the 2 other the top 5 schools in Alabama and LSU. I'm having Alabama lose to LSU on November 4th. And in the following week, I'm having LSU lose to Florida on November 11th. So just right off the bat, those 3 powers, Georgia, Alabama, LSU, all have losses down the stretch late in the season. Then you flip over to the Big Ten, and you have these kind of clusters of schools that are top contenders like Penn State, Michigan, Ohio State, basically the 3 powers in the East. I'm having them all beat each other. So I'm having Ohio State beat Penn State on October 21st. I'm having Penn State turning around a couple of weeks later, beating Michigan on November 11th. And then for the game, I'm having Michigan once again beat Ohio State.
Which trying to get Ryan Day fired?
Which will probably get Ryan Day fired straight up.
And we're out here firing coaches already, man. It's not even September yet.
So that right there is 7 losses. And then I'm looking at USC, who has this. So just assuming that USC, everything's rolling with Caleb Williams. He's putting together another Heisman campaign. November 18th against UCLA, you're going down. You packed, in-city rivalry, future Big Ten rivalry. USC trips up, ruins what would have been a perfect season. And so all of these teams basically lose within a good 3-week span of each other, and it just completely creates chaos heading into conference championship week. How is this going to shape out? Who knows? But that's how I kind of, divvied everything up.
I'll jump in with mine next because I have a lot of the same teams. Isn't it? I think every team you mentioned, just about, I'm in with as well. So start off the bat, Georgia. I don't want a 3-peat. And then I also thought, okay, if we're making this kind of a recruiting thing as well, because they are. I don't know if you guys are paying attention to recruiting, but they might be putting together the greatest class of all time. So trying to ease that stranglehold they have in recruiting. I want Georgia. I have them losing to Auburn, Florida, and Tennessee. I want them losing 3 rivalry games of teams that are somewhat ascendant on the recruiting trail. Try to even that advantage out a little bit. And I think making Georgia's rivals better because Auburn and Florida are 2 of their biggest rivals, and they've been bad recently. So that's kind of helped their ascent a little bit. Then same thing going to the Big Ten. I just want a little bit of new blood in the playoff maybe. So I got Penn State. I want them to hand losses to Michigan and Ohio State. So I want Penn State to kind of be the clear one out of that 3. Michigan and Ohio State, they'll play at the end of the year. I don't have anything on that game. But I do have another one where it's kind of more like I'd like to see a first-year head coach make kind of a splash. I have a couple of those. Nebraska over Michigan. It would be cool to see Nebraska do something. And beating Michigan would be, I think, a big feather in Matt Rule's cap. And then another first-year head coach. I got Colorado over USC. I think that would be fun. Have USC possibly having a national championship year, Colorado come up and beat them early, give some credence to Coach Prime, what they're doing, also give a loss to a national title contender.
That game would be so pointsy.
It's
like
over
the
over bowl. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like a 70 to 65 game right
Yeah,
there.
I think Colorado. If you're playing college fantasy football, I think Colorado's offensive guys probably pretty good. Defense, I don't think that's where you want to look. And then my last one, we got to give loss to Alabama, right? You don't want them skating through unscathed. So I'm have Alabama lose to USF. I mean, why not? I think it'd be pretty good for the start of the Alex Golish era there, and also
pretty good. And then he gets back-to-back victories over Nick Saban. Oh my gosh!
Oh, that'd be the Saban would never hear the end of it. Just think about going to that Tennessee game. What he'd have to hear after that. So, so yeah, those are my 8. Let's go to Vito.
So I kind of went with.
What was your strategy here?
I kind of wanted to go with, because like conference play, fine, whatever. It always shakes out. But I wanted to go with some of those early season matchups, just have like complete surprises coming out of nowhere to kind of set the tone. And one of my big ones is I want to start off North Carolina, South Carolina. I want to see South Carolina lose and Drake May go nuclear. I just want to see all of a sudden this, like, the hype starts, number 1 pick in the draft. He goes absolutely nuclear. I did not expect them to be in top 25, and they were, so that kind of changed a little bit. So then they get to wear the Carolina jerseys all throughout the year. I also right now, and the part of this is like realignment. Just I'm annoyed at some of it, so I just want I want my Oregon State Beavers to just completely run the table. DJ Uiagalelei, and yes, I learned his name just because specifically for this reason, to just absolutely go bonkers on the schedule. And I want to hand Washington and Oregon 2 losses at the end of the season against the Oregon State Beavers. They also do get to play San Diego State. I think that'll be fun. They play San Diego and San Jose State. They have a schedule, but yeah, give me a Washington and Oregon loss to the Beavs and have them play in the conference championship. So that's 1, 2. That is 3. The next one I wanted to do, much like you were saying, except earlier in the season, Nebraska, Colorado is coming back. Super excited for that. And I would absolutely love to see, much like you said, Matt Rule get that Matt Rule come up on top and get that game and get that win, except the opposite. Deion Sanders at home gets that big win game 2 because they play TCU game 1. All of a sudden, offense goes going crazy, and Colorado shows what they can be. I think that would be really fun as their because I don't believe I think they're in Fort Worth for TCU, right? Yes. So that's their first home game in the Deion era. I think that would just be a lot of fun. That first home game, whenever it ends up being that they win, they're going to go nuts. So that's number 4. Next, we're going to go into the SEC, and I really want to see Tennessee win this dang thing. I really think their offense is a lot of fun. Joe Milton's arm, I just want him to I want him to throw a 99-yard touchdown where he literally throws it 99 yards. It's something like that. So I want Tennessee to go ahead and beat Georgia at home, and then also beat Alabama again on a walk-off. Just back-to-back years. Give me Tennessee getting Georgia and getting Alabama. And I do want to see, so that's 5 and 6. And then, yes, give me Michigan beating Ohio State, because I definitely want to see what happens with Ohio State message board Twitter with Ryan Day, who is he has 6 losses in his career, but because he has 2 Michigan, and Jim Harbaugh just doing the revenge tour for, not a cheeseburger situation. And he gets to come back and just, can you imagine being ECU? Oh man, we don't have to play Harbaugh. Maybe oh boy, now he's going to come back and liberate us. And I did have another one because I have number 8 to go. What did I say? I kind of went between this, but I think I want to see. Yeah, I want to see Boise State beat Washington in the Chris Peterson Bowl, because that's exciting and fun, and I think that's actually week 1 in Seattle, so that'll be a fun game. But I'd like to see Boise State kind of reassert themselves and beat Washington in the Chris Peterson Bowl right there. So that is my 8. I do have a couple honorable mentions that I didn't do, and I'll just throw out there. Actually, I'll wait till Nate goes, because I don't want to go ahead and then step on picks that he might take.
I like that. I do like that Boise State Washington. That would be a fun one. Nathan. What was your strategy?
my strategy. So the premise was at least at the top, funniest thing that could happen, right? Like that's the premise for two of my games. Actually, most of them. Let's be real. It's just what's the funniest thing that could happen that would just make me cackle. I don't know if it would make anyone else laugh, but it would make me personally laugh. And half the joke is making yourself laugh, right? That's just good comedy right there. So starting off September 2nd, USF beating Western Kentucky because much like Kevin Malone from The Office, it's just nice to win one. Okay. Following that up, September 9th, Alabama plays Texas. Okay. The following week, they come to Tampa and face USF. Now, what would be funnier than a pissed off Nick Saban who now has to go up against the guy who beat him last year, the OC that absolutely torched his offense, if he's coming off a loss to Texas? I believe it's at home, right? I believe they play Texas at home. So Nick Saban is double pissed that he lost to Texas, and now he's got to travel to Tampa to face the guy who beat him last year and put up, 56 points on his defense or something like that? Oh, he's going to be furious. But not as mad as when he loses to USF and has to play Ole Miss the next week. Just the absolute nuclear explosion of Nick Saban following up a Texas loss at home to a USF loss on the road and then having to play Lane Kiffin the following week. That's what I don't even care. I don't even care if they beat Ole Miss or if Ole Miss beats Alabama. I just think the lead up to that game would be artistic.
The Twitter and the press conferences would be next level.
It would be freaking next level.
How many of these get thrown up after those first two in the preview?
Seth, I would skip Alex Golsh's press conference after the Alabama win just to see what Nick Saban would do. That's how much it would be. That's how funny it would be.
Paul will be appointment viewing.
Oh,
he's lost it, Paul. It's over, Paul.
The entire week would be hilarious.
That would be
good. Lane Kiffin would have a field day that week.
He might call in. He might call in to find ball. Joey Freshwater, Joey in Oxford. You're on with Paul.
And then another funny one, September 23rd, the University of Florida. It's a game sandwiched in between Tennessee and Kentucky. They lose to Charlotte.
Oh man,
you're talking about getting people fired.
I think that'd just be hilarious. I mean, Biff Poggi really getting the thing going. Getting the thing going in Charlotte. Just sandwiched right in between Tennessee and Kentucky. Florida just crapping the bed and losing to Charlotte. That would warm my heart a little bit. And then the following week, this is just a more personal vendetta more than anything, is Rutgers losing to Wagner. Just because I was looking through the Rutgers schedule. I was like, they don't really need help losing to any of these teams. So I'm going to give them the one loss for sure. They're probably banking on or the one win that they're banking on. I'm taking it away. So completely gone. You're done. I'm sorry, Rutgers. Following that up with Central Florida losing to Kansas, because that's always funny. Then let's see, I've got two more. Then Central Florida facing the other most annoying fan base in the Big 12, but they actually lose to the middle school in Lubbock, Texas Tech, November 18th. That would be fun. And then on the same day, Liberty losing to UMass because, it's Liberty.
Poor Jamie Chadwell.
And that's my 8.
Poor Jamie Chadwell. All right, here we go, around the table. If you could give USF any 2 wins this year, what games are you giving them?
So I'll go first. It's Western Kentucky because I think the USF fans need to realize that more than likely Western Kentucky is about to throw for about 600 yards on them, and they're before they even blink, they're not going to know what hit them. it'd be really cool to see like this early proof of concept with a revamped defense under Todd Orlando. I don't think it happens, but it'd be a really fun win. And I'm not even going to play around. Like, they're not beating Alabama. The next one is you got to freaking beat FAU. You cannot, capital not lose to Florida Atlantic. Can't do it. Those are the two, like, for sure, you've got to win games. Right behind them is the UConn game. Like, it's like, that's it. You cannot lose to Florida Atlantic.
Nick, do you have two? I think if you're like, for your Twitter account, you probably want, or your X account, I'm sorry, you probably want to pencil in that FAU win, right? There seems to be a lot of Twitter chicanery going on there with that fan base. But Nick, what are your two?
Yeah, I agree with the Western Kentucky pick. Like, just right, like that would be really impressive. Just right out the gate, you get basically a big win against a team that's favored to win Conference USA this year. Like, Western Kentucky's really good, so you want to make a statement like right out the gate that, like, hey, things are actually different here. You go and you beat them with that quarterback. My second one is going to be UTSA at the end of the year. I think that would also be equally impressive because we assume that by that point, UTSA should be rolling. They should be well on their way to playing in the AAC championship game. So if you can go into the Alamo Dome later on in the season, especially if at that point you're hopefully trying to scrap your way to bowl eligibility, if you can like be able to go into the Alamo Dome, I think it's on a Friday night too. So be on like ESPN2 or whatever, national television. And yeah, getting that win again, sending a message, that'd be really huge.
Yeah, I think I'm kind of a combination. I think FAU would be good, not just because of Twitter, but also it's homecoming. I think you want one big win at home. I think that'd feel pretty good. You don't want another in-state school coming in and beating you year one. And then UTSA would be my other one, just because quality team on the road, it'd be a big sign. Vito, what are your two? And then we'll get out of here.
You pretty much kind of hit all of them. The big one for me, and I'll just play devil's advocate here. I got to go UConn. You got an 8-game winning streak against them, and they left the conference, so you stopped playing them. I just think you have to keep that winning streak. And, I mean, UConn's an independent. They look a little better. They have some I can't believe it, have some life under Jim Moore Jr. It would just be great to just keep that USF beats UConn mentality going. I really like that Western Kentucky one. But I'll go ahead and say I think it would be great to beat Memphis. Going into Memphis and beating Memphis, just a program that USF has had some banger games against. It'd be really nice to be able to go into go on the road and beat a team that's a holdover from the old AAC and just kind of get that going. And I mean, the Western Kentucky, that was my choice, but everyone chose it, so I just did Memphis a little different. But Western Kentucky winning game wouldn't be great because then you get that FBS win out of the way. That's the most impressive win of the last 3 years, essentially. And then you don't have to worry about it's like then everybody starts feeling more confident about where the program's going. With everything else going on, then all of a sudden it's like adding rocket fuel to the program. So, I don't expect it because Western Kentucky's offense is going to be amazing, but there'll be a really good coalition. The whole U.S. segment would absolutely love that.
Are we sure Ryan Silverfield is going to be the head coach on November 4th at Memphis?
I just feel like you don't really like the AC's not firing coaches that early unless there's a scandal. If Golish goes and beats, that might be the pin.
Jeff Scott got fired like November 3rd.
That's the
yeah. So like I feel like that could be that game. But yeah, kind of that same.
They've got a tough. I was their first two. I was like, okay, they opened with Bethune and then at Arkansas State. Then they go Navy, Missouri, Boise State, Tulane.
Ooh, Boise State.
That's tough. That's a tough little stretch right there. Boise State's at home.
Yeah.
Tulane's at home. Missouri's in St. Louis.
And then you got
that'll be interesting.
UAB. They're on the road for UAB and North Texas before back home. So,
yeah, no, that's a tough stretch right there. But all right, so we hit the AP top 25. We hit the pack possibilities, and maybe back to the Big Ten. There's all kinds of stuff there, and then we found out who we want to lose. So, excellent show again tonight, boys. We'll be back next week, and we'll be getting pretty close to some games being played. So
next
we'll
week
start
we get to
gearing
talk
up
about real football.
Yeah, that'll be fun. So, boys, thank you very much. Like and subscribe. Help us game the YouTube algorithm with comments. Thank you.